A bill that limits rights for transgender athletes is on the way to the governor's desk, but the governor is expected to try and veto that controversial bill. Devin Bartolotta breaks down what happens next.
A representative from Governor John Bel Edwards' office won't say that he'll outright veto the bill, but says he is concerned about the effect that this might have on transgender kids. The Fairness in Women's Sports Act was put forth by State Senator Beth Mizell, a Republican from Franklinton. The bill forbids athletes assigned male at birth but are now female to participate on female sports teams. The bill passed by a wide margin in the Senate earlier this month and overwhelmingly in the House Thursday. The transgender athlete ban has complicated controversies and has garnered widespread criticism from LGBTQ advocates like the Human Rights Campaign. The organization released a statement Thursday writing, quote, "This bill is nothing but another attempt to discriminate against the LGBTQ community and a step back for the entire state." Governor John Bel Edwards agrees.
The idea that the weight of the state would be put behind something that to me is unnecessary and discriminatory and very hurtful for those individuals when there's not a compelling reason to do it.
In March, the state of Mississippi banned trans girls from participating in girls' sports, citing that they had, quote, inherently different athletic capabilities, although there's little evidence to back that claim up. Lawsuits are expected. So what happens next in Louisiana? Well, if the governor were to veto the bill after session adjourns, because the House and Senate passed this bill with a veto-proof majority, they may be able to override his veto in a special session. Devin Bartolotta, Eyewitness News.
Louisiana is just one of more than 30 states that are considering or have passed restrictions on transgender athletes.